the humanitarian catastrophe in Syria. Let me also assure Canadians that the government will continue to be seized with the broader terrorist threats against Canada. We have strengthened laws in this country to deal with the issue of so-called Canadian foreign fighters. We have
broadened reasons for revoking passports for people who are participating in terrorist activities, and we have taken steps to remove citizenship from people with dual citizenship.
Forward additional measures to strengthen the ability of our security services to monitor aspiring terrorists, to, where possible, prevent their return to Canada, or two, where that is not possible, give greater tools to be able to charge and prosecute. Mr. Speaker, to return to the matter before us today, I urge all members to consider and to support the motion we have presented. I do this, Mr. Speaker, in recognizing that in a democracy, especially one approaching an election, there is rarely political upside in supporting any kind of military action and little risk in opposing it. Néanmoins, pour assurer
but to guarantee regional and global security and the security of Canadians, this intervention is necessary.
There is none better than the fact that the mission has been launched by President Obama, the leader who had withdrawn American troops and proudly ended the war in Iraq. Of course, Mr. Speaker, one could say that while the mission is evidently necessary, we don't have to be the ones doing it because others will. But Mr. Speaker, throughout our history, that has never been the Canadian way. To do only It has never been the Canadian way to do only the most easy and praiseworthy of actions and to leave the tough things for others. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, colleagues, we should be under no illusion. If Canada wants to keep its voice in the world, and we should, since so many of our challenges are global, being a free rider means you are not taken seriously.
The threat ISIL represents is real, serious, and explicitly directed in part at our country.
Check. This terrorist threat can only grow and grow quickly. As a government, we know our ultimate responsibility is to protect Canadians and to defend our citizens from those who would do harm to us or our families. Nous savons aussi que notre pays.
We also know that our country, like its allies, shares the obligation, the burden that falls upon all free populations to rise up to fight threats to the world when it is able to do so.
Our allies recognize and respond to a threat that would also harm us. We Canadians do not stand on the sidelines. We do our part. Lundi.
On Monday, the House will debate this motion presented calling for an air campaign against the Islamic State.
Support for this mission, and of course, our support for the brave men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces who are now and always ready and willing to answer the call of their country.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, first of all, I would like to thank the Prime Minister for having come to the House of Commons today to make this important announcement. In a democracy like ours, it should go without saying because the Prime Minister will be determining the fate of many young men and women, courageous young men and women who will serve their country and risk their lives.
No more sacred trust for a Prime Minister than sending young Canadian women and men to fight and risk making the ultimate sacrifice in a foreign war. The Prime Minister is asking for the support of this Parliament. He's asking for Canadian support, but the Prime Minister has refused to answer their questions. Let me quote the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, you can understand I neither have the will nor the desire to get into detailed discussions of military operations here. Neither the will nor the desire. Here was this Parliament, and it was not just about the details. The Prime Minister hasn't outlined a broad strategic blueprint for the mission. He can't even answer basic questions about the breadth or cost of Canada's military deployment. When did Canadian forces arrive in Iraq, and how many? No answer. What contribution have our American allies requested? No answer. How much will this mission cost? What are the rules of engagement? What is our exit strategy? No answer. No answer. No answer. These are not hypothetical questions.
Canada has just completed its involvement in Afghanistan. What at the beginning was also supposed to be a short-term and restricted mission turned into a theater of operations where our military personnel were deployed for the longest time in our history, 12 years, $30 billion, over 40,000 veterans of that war, 160 dead, thousands of injured, and thousands of others who now suffer from post-traumatic stress. Is that mission accomplished? Like in this case, at the beginning, the Afghan mission only included a few dozen soldiers. And 29 days ago, the Conservatives insisted that Canadian was only engaging in a non-combat mission for only a few months, with only a few dozen soldiers. The NDP had its doubts. Canadians had their doubts. The only ally of the Prime Minister was the Liberal Party, which unreservedly supported a mission that, without a doubt, was going to lead us to where we are today.
The Prime Minister's plan to begin a 30-day mission in Iraq was the Liberal Party, even though there wasn't a shadow of a doubt that that would lead us exactly where we are today. But now that Canadian troops are committed, Conservatives are telling us the mission will be expanded. Airstrikes, refueling capabilities, aerial surveillance, and now the Prime Minister is specifically opening the door to bombing in Syria. From mission creep to mission leap. The United States has been in this conflict for over 10 years. They have been fighting ISIS under one name or another for over 10 years. While ISIS has renamed itself several times since 2004, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, Mujahideen Shura Council, the Islamic State in Iraq, and Al-Sham, Syria. This is literally the same insurgent group that U.S. forces have been battling for over a decade. While ISIS has renamed itself several times since 2004, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, Mujahideen Shura Council, the Islamic State in Iraq, and Al-Sham, Syria. This is literally the same insurgent group that U.S. forces have been battling for over a decade. Even the Foreign Affairs Minister, in a moment of rare candor for this government, admitted that there are no quick fixes in Iraq. He called the fight against ISIS and groups like it the struggle of a generation. That may well prove to be an understatement. In one of the Prime Minister's few real answers about this mission, he said Canada would be in Iraq until ISIS no longer has the capability to launch attacks in Iraq, Syria, or anywhere else. Now he claims it'll be only 6 months. It can't be both. The defeat of the insurgency in Iraq is a goal that the United States has been trying without success to achieve since the wrong-headed invasion of 2003. All of the horrors unfolding before our eyes are the results of that failed mission. Remember back in 2003? It was this Prime Minister, at the time Leader of the Opposition, who went to the Americans to berate the Canadian government for not getting involved in what he considered a just and noble cause. Their nostalgia is such that his immigration minister, during the emergency debate in this House just a few days ago, actually dusted off the canard of weapons of mass destruction to try to justify this war. Their nostalgia is such that his immigration minister, during the emergency debate in this House just a few days ago, actually dusted off the canard of weapons of mass destruction to try to justify this war. The Prime Minister insists that this mission in Iraq will not be allowed to become a quagmire. But isn't that precisely what our American allies have been facing in Iraq for the last 10 years? Will Canada be stuck a decade from now, mired in a war we wisely avoided entering a decade ago? Do we have a plan for the war? Do we have a plan for the thousands or tens of thousands of veterans that we have the sacred responsibility to fully support in years after? Nous allons espérer que
We must hope that the debate that will be held Monday will bring answers, and that unlike the emergency debate, the ministers responsible will be there, and that they will be able to inform Canadians.
Democrats who feel these questions haven't been answered. A few examples. Globe and Mail. The case for Canada to go to war in Iraq has not been made. Le courage de dire non.
The courage to say no, André Pratt in La Presse.
The Toronto Star editorial. The Prime Minister fails to make the case for Canadian combat role in Iraq. There are dozens of editorials and opinions like that across our country. L'intervention militaire.
Military intervention is not the only tool at Canada's disposal, and Iraq is not the only place where horrendous violence has been committed. In Congo, 15 years of killing, 5 million dead. But the Prime Minister has never considered military intervention in Congo. In Darfur, hundreds of thousands of people dead, millions who have fled, but the Prime Minister has never considered a military intervention in Darfur. Why?
Why is military action supposedly our only choice in Iraq when it's not even considered elsewhere?
Why does the Prime Minister think that he can accomplish through military force what has not been able to be accomplished since 2003?
ISIS has thrived in Iraq and Syria precisely because those countries lack stable, well-functioning governments capable of maintaining peace and security within their own borders. Canada's first contribution should be to use every diplomatic, humanitarian, and financial resource at our disposal to respond to the overwhelming human tragedy unfolding on the ground and strengthen political institutions in both those countries. With the well-deserved credibility Canada earned by rejecting the initial ill-advised invasion of Iraq, we are in a position to take on that task. The tragedy in Iraq and Syria will not end with another Western-led invasion in that region. It will end by helping the people of Iraq and Syria to build the political, institution, and security capabilities they need to oppose these threats themselves. Canada, for our part, should not rush into this war.